So welcome to Family History Today, the Center for Jewish History's monthly series of genealogy-themed public programs. My name is Moria Amit, and I am the manager of the center's Ackman and Ziff Family Genealogy Institute. I'm thrilled that all of you are joining us today. I'd especially like to thank today's program's co-sponsor, the Together Plan, and its CEO, Deborah Bruner, whose logistical support made this program possible. So just a bit about the Center for Jewish History and where I am based, the Ackman and Ziff Family Genealogy Institute. The Center for Jewish History provides a collaborative home for 5 in-house partner organizations that together form the largest archive on the modern Jewish experience outside of Israel. In addition, the center houses the Genealogy Institute, which strives to connect researchers to the wealth of genealogy resources at the center and to make family history accessible to people of all ages, abilities, and levels of experience, whether Jewish or non-Jewish. We encourage you to visit our Genealogy Institute Monday through Thursday, 9:30 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. No appointment needed. At the Institute, you will enjoy free access to genealogy databases and reference books with our librarians and experienced volunteers on hand to provide guidance. If you're unable to visit us in person, you may email us at gi@cjh.org. I will put that in the chat box shortly to ask for advice on your research questions or to schedule a free 45-minute Zoom consultation. Finally, to stay informed about our upcoming programs, sign up to receive the center's weekly e-newsletter by going to our homepage, cjh.org, and entering your name and email address in the pop-up box. A few housekeeping notes before I introduce our speakers today. Please send us your questions and comments anytime during this program by using the Q&A box on the bottom of your screen. I see that a few of you have already taken advantage of that. Please note, however, that our guest speakers will only answer your questions after the presentation in the dedicated Q&A portion of this program. If you'd like to view the captions for this program, click on the closed caption or CC button on the bottom of your screen and then click Show Subtitles. And lastly, this program will be recorded. The recording has already started, and you will all receive an email with the link to watch the recording as soon as it becomes available. Please note that because we take the time to correct the captions for each program recording, it typically takes us 2 to 4 weeks to post the video online. Thank you for your patience. All right, on to today, or for some people, tonight's program. I'm very pleased that we have 2 guest speakers with us today from the nonprofit organization, the Together Plan, or TTP, which supports Jewish communities, communities with special needs, Holocaust survivors, children of all ages, and families living under the poverty line in Belarus. Our first speaker, Carl Kaplan, is an amateur genealogist who lives just outside of Boston. Carl first engaged with TTP in 2020 to research his family roots in Minsk. The resulting research was so successful that he became a volunteer caseworker for TTP, guiding new clients through the process and interfacing with members of the TTP's team in Belarus. Carl is also a certified historical tour guide in Boston, including the Jewish North End of Boston. Our second speaker, Vasily Zaitsau, is the Together Plan's Archive Services Coordinator and lives in Minsk, Belarus. I'm very excited to have our first guest from Belarus joining us today. Vasily interfaces between TTP's Archive Services caseworkers based mostly in the UK, a few in the US, and its team of archivists who are based in Belarus, who do the day-to-day research in the country's national, regional, and local archives. Having a coordinator on the ground in Belarus who speaks English and Russian is instrumental in moving the research process ahead. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Carl, who's going to get us started today. Carl?
Thank you so much, Moria. Let me bring my share screen up. And if we could just verify that you can see the presentation.
Yes, I can see it. Thank you.
Awesome. Okay. So again, On behalf of the Together Plan, I wanted to thank the Center for Jewish History and all the participants today for giving us a few minutes. And hopefully this will be educational for your ancestral searches, especially for Belarus. So again, my name is Carl Kaplan. I am both a client and a caseworker, and I live in the Boston area of Massachusetts in the United States. And then after I present, we will have Vasily Zaitsau, who is the Belarus Archive Services Coordinator. And as mentioned, Vasily is on the ground in Minsk, where it always seems to snow. But we'll talk about that a little bit later. Oops. And we are having a little problem. Here we go. I wanted to start off with this screen, just to give you an idea of what's capable when you go look for your records of your family in Belarus. I'm going to hit this one a little bit later, but this was the first search I did for my father's family that came from Minsk, and I'll go into a little bit more detail. But again, one of the things, if we're successful, is giving you your ancestral pathway, which, as you can see, goes back into the mid-1700s, something I never thought was going to be possible. To introduce our leaders, Deborah Brunner, who is on the call today, is our founder and CEO. Deborah comes from London. Many of our team are in London, so we get a chance to use some English colloquialisms, which you'll see. And then Artur Lifshitz is our Belarus country director. Artur may or may not be on the call today, but Artur is also on the ground in Minsk. So just to kind of get off to a start of what we do here, we offer a fully custom, or as they say in the UK, bespoke professional archive service with a dedicated team of experienced archivists. This is extremely important for Belarus. My mother's family came from Galicia, which most of the records that are available are online. I did lots of searches. I took my family back, all from the comfort of my computer. Unfortunately, when it comes to Belarus, that's not the case. So it becomes very important for people who want to research their family to engage with an archivist. And I'll go through some of the details, how it works. Vasily will go through what we find, how we put things together. As I mentioned, and I will continue to mention, our archives team is on the ground in Belarus. We work directly with the archives. Many of the team are former archive employees, which is important because they know the people there, they know where things are located. If you've ever been to a large library, it's not always the easiest thing in the world to just go find the documents. So you need somebody who can do that. Some important points about the Together Plan. I just want to, give a little heads up, a little kind of summary of the Together Plan before we get into the archive services. As Moria, mentioned, we are a nonprofit, or in the UK, a charity. We have worked with over 100 clients. We've been doing archive services for about 4 years. The actual charity started long before that with other missions that we'll go through. It's headquartered in London. We currently have about 14 people on the ground in Belarus, like Vasily. We are heavily involved in the community. I'll be honest with you, I'm one of the people who was raised that there's no Jewish community left in Belarus. There's also no records left in Belarus. And I have found that both of those are wrong, I'm happy to say. So you'll see how we deal somewhat with the community. In fact, Artur, our country director, was also recently elected chairman of the Jewish Religious Union in Belarus, which we're very proud of. Important to point out, too, is that while we are centric on Belarus, we do have established connections. I'm sure many of you have attended talks on the changing borders, and you know that the country your ancestors came from might be a different country today. And so as a result, we have a connection with an archivist in Lithuania that we can work with. We even have some contacts just over the border in Poland, should we find that some of the shtetls you're looking for ended up there. Vasily can go more into that. We are a unique organization because we have diverse missions, not just the archive search. We have diverse people and diverse places all over the world. Some of the roles that you'll be concerned with if you engage with us in an archive search are the caseworker, the archive services manager like Vasily, the archives coordinator is actually Vasily. The archive services manager is the person who manages all of us caseworkers, and the archivists themselves who work in the archives. Most importantly, you'll be working with someone like me, a caseworker. So we are the point of contact. We're all volunteers. We're geographically diverse, but we are always able to speak English. So we work remotely, but as long as we have a computer and the ability to communicate with you, generally in English, then we're all set. We guide people through the process, and we have a pretty strict process. And you can put all your questions to people like me, the caseworker, and then we would communicate with Vasily to go back into the archives. When you do initiate a search inquiry, you'll end up with a quote. And should you decide to accept that quote, then we will have an invoice sent to you that you can pay online. You can pay by other means, but generally people pay online. And then we keep you up to date with the progress. We also can check in on Minsk whenever we want to see what the progress is. This can be a slow process. For anyone who's been involved in archive searches, it can take time. I just want to point out, you may or may not have heard of the Jewish Tapestry Project. That is our sister group in the United States. However, it was decided that for a lot of reasons, all of our archive search work will go through the Together plan. So as a result, should you submit an inquiry web form, it will go through the Together plan and you'll always see that. It's also why if you decide to move ahead, the quote you get will be in British pounds, but then you pay online and it gets converted, just to kind of a heads up on that. You can see that the Together plan has a lot of missions. Most importantly for you is the one on top, connecting Jewish people all over the world to their ancestry, which is, I hope, why the many of you who have signed in today, what you're looking for. So again, here's a little bit more showing our team. On the left, you see Vasily, and in the back, Artur, and on the right, Sergey, and then the rest of our, or almost the rest of our Belarus team. They're on the ground, mainly in Minsk. I believe there are some in Grodno also, but we have access to all the archives in Belarus. Just want to cover a few of the things we're engaged in and then go right into the archive searches. Our biggest project right now is for Brest or Brest-Litovsk Jewish Cemetery Memorial. If you have any ancestors from that area, from Brest, you'll probably be extremely interested in this, and we'd love to hear from you. The cemetery there was desecrated about 80 years ago, which is not uncommon. I'm sure you've heard of things like that. We discovered tombstones, matzvot, just littered in an area. We warehoused them. We've gone through them and cataloged them. As you can see, there's fragments of many of the headstones. I believe there's between 1,200 and 2,000. We even, what we're trying to do is put together a memorial. We're going to have a crowdfunding campaign in May, and hopefully that will secure enough funding. We already have the agreement with the government to build a memorial, and that is what the proposal, what the memorial will look like. One thing that's very interesting is because we've cataloged these stones, we put it in a database. It's accessible to anyone. If you can't seem to find it, let us know. We have already had one person come and say, after we presented on the topic, that a member that his great-great-grandmother is in the database, which was a new discovery for him. So that's why we want to keep it moving. Some of the other things we do. It gives me great joy, having been raised that there's no Jews left in Belarus, to see that we have Jewish heritage clubs with children. So our archivists are professional. That's why there's a fee. And we also take a fee towards our other charity mission, which are things like these Jewish heritage clubs. We also, I think we're getting ready to maybe send another truck, or as they say in the UK, a lorry full of humanitarian aid overland to Belarus. We are also part of the European Roots of Jewish Heritage. And something that might be of great interest to you are these audio tours that we created. They're accessible on Izzy Travel. You can see one that was of particular interest to me was the Jewish streets of Minsk. They're available in 5 languages, including English and Russian. So feel free to go check those out. We also publish books. There are memories of the Minsk ghetto. We also just recently published a new book about Anna Machitz. And I mean, this is prestigious enough that we were very proud to have the ambassadors from the UK, Germany, and Austria attend. And then on a somewhat lighter note, we also have recipes. We'd love to hear if you have, from your Belarusian roots, some recipes, a carrot stew. And then one of my newly found second cousins that is a story for another time, but we've been missing for over 100 years, gave me a recipe on forschmeck. So now that you know a little bit about the Together plan, let's dive into the archive searches, which is probably why you came to this call. So for many of you, you may know, you may not, I kind of hinted, why do you want to use a professional archivist? Well, again, most of these records are not online. Some are, most are not. Some people have asked me, hey, can I just go there and do it myself? I'd love to visit Belarus. Nice place to visit, but you're going to have to pay for the trip. You're going to have to become fluent in Belarusian, because you've got to work with the people in the archives, and that's the language spoken today. And you're going to also have to learn Old Russian, because that's the language of the archives. You're going to have to get access to the archives, which can take time, money, and paperwork, and you've got to stay there the whole time. As I mentioned before, you've got to learn where everything is located in the archives. Which archives are you going to search? Versus somebody who's a professional and has been doing this for years. You've got a very important question to answer. Where is your family registered? My family lived in Minsk. Sounds pretty simple. Turns out they were registered an hour away in Uzda. So I would have been looking in the wrong place. You need to know that. Our archivists can get a feel for where they might really have been registered. And finally, you have to like snow, which is fine for people like me in Boston, but Belarus seems to get an awful lot of snow, and I don't know if everybody here wants to deal with that. Why should you use the Together plan to look for your ancestral records? As I've mentioned, we have a team of experts on the ground. We also have access to archives all over Belarus. My family was from Minsk, though they were registered an hour away. Pretty much everything for me was in Minsk, but that's not true with a lot of other people. So it's important to know where all the archives are and how to access. You're also going to be supporting the charity work so we can tell the story. That cemetery memorial for Brest-Litovsk is very important, and you'll be helping with that, along with those Jewish heritage clubs and other things. We have many testimonials you can see on the website. I'll briefly show a couple. We are very careful about maintaining privacy, which is important for a lot of people. We provide all the scans of the documents. I don't read Russian, but I'm going to show you why the scans were very, very important to me. And then finally, we have a very strict process that we follow so we can keep track of where everything is and give you progress updates and know when we need to remind people to, what's going on in the archives. Results are very important. Well, it starts with luck. The reality is there's got to be luck involved. For me, I've been incredibly lucky. Every time I put in a search, they find something. It's not true all the time. In phase one, and we divide into phase one and phase two, and Vasily will go into this, 70% of our searches yield enough results that say, let's do a phase two. If you accept a phase two, about 70% of those yield very good results. The rest have positive results, maybe not as much as we were looking for. And there are some results which are kind of maybe not something you were prepared for, and I'll show you mine. So as I mentioned, we're a very strict process. We have a procedures document that our caseworkers follow. We also use Salesforce, which, yes, for a large company is to maintain sales opportunities, but for us, it's for each of the clients and their searches to maintain where are they in the search? What do they need? What have we emailed back and forth? We log emails so that if your caseworker is out and you have to ask a question and maybe they're gone for a week, we can look up and see what the communication was. And then we also have monthly meetings, which you can see on the calendar below, where all the caseworkers get together with Vasily and Artur, and we talk about the progress, anything we need to know, news in the archives, but also our individual cases. I mentioned that you'll get an invoice and then you can pay the invoice online. Again, it goes to the UK, but since you're paying online with a credit card, it's very easy to use. I've used it many times. So some of the testimonials and client stories. So, I just want to mention and highlight that this one was particularly interesting to me because Claudia pointed out that it was a gray area of wild guesses. To be very honest with you, I didn't know anything about my family in Minsk. In fact, the reason I got the Together plan was I found, like many of you, I found my Ellis Island manifest for my grandfather, which had his address in Minsk. I asked on Jewish Gen, the discussion forum that many of you probably use, does anybody know if this address is still around and how would I find out? Someone in the UK said you should contact the Together plan, which I had never heard of. I contacted them and they got me an answer. And that's when I noticed that they do archive searches. And so that's when I became a client. And how did it start? Well, it all starts here with an archive inquiry form. You fill out your name and information. You put whatever you know about your family and you attach whatever documents you have, as many as you want. You can always supply more if needed to give us an idea of how we can help you with an archive search. It's free to fill out this inquiry form. I would very highly recommend for anybody who's trying to search in Belarus, start by filling this form out. It's free. One thing that's very important to remember is we do archive searches. We don't really do genealogy. So we're kind of confined to working in Belarus. So if your questions are more along the line of finding my second cousin in Philadelphia or looking for a manifest in Ellis Island, we don't really do that. You know, lots of people through all, especially the Center for Jewish History's presentations, how to find that information. It's just a way to kind of understand what we do. So I want to give a quick show, not go into detail because it's not your family and it's probably not that interesting. But for my family, this is what I knew. This is from my ancestry tree. The people in circle, I can go back to my great-great-grandfather. It's the only photo we have from Russia. That's them. This is what we found. And I showed you this before. It's quite amazing because it goes back to my sixth great-grandfather, Itzka. What's really kind of incredible to me is that Liba Itzkovich Kaplan, born in 1775, my fifth great-grandfather, had to be the first Kaplan in the family, because I learned that the Jews of Russia, only got surnames in 1804. So he was born Liba, son of Itzka, and then in 1804 got the name Kaplan, which means when I'm shown the 1818 census, because I got the scans like everyone does in a phase 2 search, I'm able to see his name. And I can certainly, I've learned to read the name Kaplan or Kaplun in Russian. There I am looking at the first Kaplan in my family. I would have never guessed I could find that. Another family member, my great-grandmother, I was able to find her maiden name here in the US. What became very interesting is they did the same thing. Oh my God, look at all these names. I did something interesting with it. I started wondering how many of these people may have come to the US. Could I guess their name? Because we didn't know anything about her. So I did what I call a backwards. I go back to Russia, sideways, find some siblings, nephews, and nieces, and go forwards, back across the Atlantic to the US or wherever they emigrated. And I started wondering, by the way, you see the highlight, we put the gender on the name because like me, many of you may not know whether that's a male or a female, and it's probably easier to research the males. Look at the ones in yellow, Berko and Yosel. Well, sure enough, I did a search on them and I found a manifest where one of them mentioned that his contact in Minsk was his brother-in-law, Osher Kaplan. That's my great-grandfather. So not only does that confirm the work of the Together plan, but all those names are my family members. And then I found who he was visiting or actually going to live with, his son. So then I used that with all the genealogy lessons we learned, found out he was a shoe dealer, which ended up being confirmed. And I was able to add all these people to my family tree. And that's only one of them. And I still have to go through more. Interestingly enough, the person I was able to contact was on 23andMe, but our connection was only 424th. I would have never gotten down that connection. It also listed her as a third cousin on my mother's side. She's a third cousin once removed on my father's side. So here, I've been able to assist with all my genealogy in the US by going back to Russia and then coming across. I thought that was very interesting. I did the same thing with my great-great-grandmother. And sure enough, here's her whole family tree. I got very lucky. It was all there. Another thing that came out of this was a court case. Never knew about this. My great-grandfather, Osher Kaplan, was arrested for illegally selling a bottle of Lipsky beer on the street in Minsk, 1902. Went on for 36 pages. One part, which we call the fiddler on the roof line, talks about he lives on the house, and in his own words, he lives in the house of Yankel the stove maker, which my family thinks is the best line of the whole court case. There's full, complete oaths taken by the Christian witnesses and the Jewish witnesses, which were very interesting to a professor at Brandeis. It's rare that you get the complete oaths and just all that information. Another client asked about Brest because they had an address of someone in their family. Not only were we able to find that the house was still there and take photos, but we actually took them back to 1896 with a blueprint. So those are some of the amazing things that you can find. Just to summarize some of the other testimonials, that we were able to be a trusted partner. And that's really what we want to do, is understand what you're looking for. Many times there's back and forth. We know this is incredibly important. We've had people looking for, mothers or fathers because they were from orphanages. This is very important, and we want to treat that respect. If you went to IAJGS in London last summer, Lee Dworkin was one of the hosts from Jewish Genealogical Society of Great Britain. He was so happy that he wrote a 3-part article for the Together Plan, which is available online. Stanley Goldberg wrote that he was excited we uncovered new generations, which is a trend that we see over and over again. And then another client really like the fact that we don't give up. If there's a chance that we can find something, we will tell you. So now what I want to do is turn it over to Vasily in Minsk to tell you how we actually proceed and how they do the search. So I will let you take it away, Vasily.
Yeah, thanks, Carl. Thanks for this introduction and for sharing with us your story on both being a caseworker and being the Together Plan client. So hello, everyone. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, whenever you are. And many thanks for the Center for Jewish History for giving us this chance, this platform to tell about our services. So let's start and let me show you what we do here as archive team on the field. Please, next one. Here you can see, oops, it doesn't work. Okay, yes. Here you can see how we structured our services. As Carl told you, everything starts with the web form that you submit on our website. After it, you'll be put for some time on a waiting list. It is needed because, first of all, we have a big number of ongoing inquiries, and we have a limited number of archivists working physically in archives, but we are reducing this time by extending, first of all, a number of caseworkers and also a number of archivists. But at the same time, we also always consider that increasing quantity is not always increasing quality. So we are very careful with this. The search itself, we split it into two phases, phase 1 and phase 2 respectively. So they also could be named like a short and a full searches. I'll explain you both of the stages in details now. Next one. So as I told you, everything starts with a web forum. I'll show you it to you. Then you'll be put for some time on a waiting list. While you're on a waiting list, you will be always updated with your status by one of our caseworkers. Caseworkers will navigate you through the entire process while you are a Together Plan client. After it, we will, after we discussed internally with archive team your request, and if we see that we have sufficient information or not, we will offer you to proceed with either phase 1 or phase 2 of the search. Next one. Here you can see the web form I told you before, where you give us your personal contact information. And next one. And it is the example of a field web forum. Here you provide us with how to say, like, vital information of the people of the family you're looking for. It's of course first and last names, their years of living, and of course place of living. Also, you can underline if you're looking for some specific information, or maybe like specific document, if you're looking for a birth record or maybe census list, passports, IDs, etc. Also, you are allowed to attach documents. Regarding attachments, we always happy when you attach some photos, some maybe censuses, some maybe documents you found on Jewish Gen, etc. Next one. Yes, here you can see an example. Yes, thanks. Also, some people put in a web form links to various genealogy like sources, genealogy forums, and sometimes to sources, online sources with their family trees. Unfortunately, it not always works because not all services are available in Belarus domain where our archive team located. So we more welcome when people provide us with attachments, with PDF, or even handwritten documents, handwritten family trees. Next one. As I told you, in web forum, you give us names or name, years of living, and a place like shtetl, town, any place you know as their hometown. But it's very important point for you to know whenever you check documents on the Russian Empire, that in the Tsarist, in the Russian Empire time, Jews were allowed to live only within a specific area that was named Pale of Settlement. And the territory of modern Belarus was in this area, this Pale of Settlement. Within this Pale of Settlement, all Jews were assigned to a specific Jewish community within specific settlement like shtetl. It means that documents on this person was recorded respectively in the place of his assignment and not a place of his living. So in modern world, if a person lived in Boston but was assigned in New York, we should look in New York documents for his records, not in Boston ones. But the problem is that many Jews used not to reassign themselves and lived outside of the Pale of Settlement, or not to live in their place of assignment for many reasons, and it was most common to avoid military draft and to avoid taxation, to avoid maybe criminal prosecution, and many other various reasons. Next one. Here you can see like differences between phase 1 and phase 2 respectively. Phase 1 we also call initial investigation. During this first check, we deal with the most important like informative documents and our own databases to find out 2 points. First of all, to find the real place of assignment of your ancestors, I explained you before. And the second, to understand, to find out how many documents are preserved and available in archives in Belarus to check in case of a full search. So after this phase 1, we find out the feasibility of a full long-term and time and effort consuming search. Normally this phase 1 takes 2-3 months, and about fees, it costs about 2.5 Great Britain pounds. But it always depends on various factors. I'll explain it later. Phase 2, which is a full and very labor consuming search, when our archivists, they manually check every document that relevant for the area and period of time when and where your ancestors lived. After this this phase, you'll be provided with a report that contains all translated identified records and scans of the documents we checked. Normally it takes about 4 or 5 months, but sometimes it could be more, especially if you have a waiting list. Next one. Sorry. As I told you before, our fees depend on a number of like points to remember, factors. And first of all, it's a number of family lines, or basically just surnames to look for. Number of settlements, like places to check, a number of archives to visit physically across Belarus. When I say fee depends on a number of surnames, it doesn't mean that we consider Kaplan and Kaplan as 2 different surnames. Of course not. We always understand that there could be different spellings, pronunciations, and we always consider a set of similar surnames and names to look for within a search. Next one. As I told you before, fees also depend on a number of places to check and a number of archives to visit across Belarus. It is because documents, archive documents in Belarus, they split it into 2 parts. First part is documents compiled before the revolution, before the Soviet period that starts in 1917. Documents before 1917, they stored in 2 archives only, in Minsk, our capital, and in Grodno, big regional city. And we have archivists living in these cities. They work in like literally daily, go into archives and to reading halls, and they work with documents, they check it. And it's easier for us and maybe for any archive company to work with documents before 1917, because it's easier to access them, because documents post 1917. They are stored like in 26 archives across Belarus, and it means sometimes you have to go for a business trip for 2-3 weeks, and a fee will be increased respectively because of accommodation costs, logistic costs, and some other aspects. Next one. So at this stage, we came to the most frequently asked questions. A question by our potential clients is what do we check physically in archives, what kind of documents, and what kind of information we can obtain, we can extract from the documents. Next one. First of all, we look for civil records. When I say civil records, I refer to record books of synagogues where births, deaths, marriages, divorces were recorded. It's a little worrying for you that in Belarus, this kind of documents, civil records, preserved really badly, and they were destroyed during the period of two world wars. Here you can see on this slide an example of a birth record from a synagogue. It can give us such information as name, surname, of course, parents' names, a date when a person was born, and it's interesting that on the left you can see it in Russian, and on the right it's in Hebrew. So basically, Hebrew text just duplicates the Russian one, with only difference that Hebrew text refers to a Hebrew calendar. Next one. Here you can see record or birth record of a male children, and it's interesting that records of male children contain information on a date when a boy was circumcised. You know this process, like also maybe obres, and the name of a person who carried it out. Next one. Civil records, death. Here you can find some information as name, surname, of course, date of death, cause of death, and a place of death. Having person's and a place of death and where a person was buried, and knowing when a person where a person was buried, we can find out maybe even matseva, if a tomb still exists. Next one. Census and family list. These ones are the most, it's two different documents, census list and family list, but they're somehow similar. And it's the most important documents for genealogists and our archive team, because normally family in these documents consisted of the oldest male member and his descendants from generation to generation, with their spouses, children, some dates, some notes, etc. And it's brilliant for us when sometimes you find a family and it consisted not of just like 3-4 persons, but maybe of 3-4 generations, and it could be like 15-17 persons or even more sometimes listed on one page. Next one. Name and alphabetical lists. In these ones, residents were recorded by their surnames alphabetically, and usually only males. It's important to remember that in the Russian Empire, women before them, like 1820s, 1830s, were not recorded almost at all. Next one. IDs and passports. Here you can see example of ID of Polish time, because in the interwar period, Belarus was partially in Poland. And in comparison to modern IDs, you can find here such information as person identifying features like maybe eye color, hair color, religion, and some other features. Next one. Police department documents, court documents, court summons, court meetings, and some other documents. So criminal cases, it's my favorite favorite part personally. And on this slide, you can see the case we translated to Carl, but there are many others we already translated for our clients. Next one. Personal profiles which were attached when a person applied for a visa or for a person for a foreign passport. Next one. Draft lists also very important, and in the document with interesting information, because in the Russian Empire, almost all men were obliged to serve in the army, so officials tried to record almost every single male resident, and we have like big number of records when boys were recorded at the age of like 2-3 years, or 2-3 weeks, or even less. In these documents, there is a really great column with a family composition, so it can give us information on family structure, and also great column with identifying features. You can like find out everything about a person: height, weight, chest volume, foot size, I don't know, eye color, hair color, nose shape, or even if there were any like scars maybe or acne on the face. Really interesting. Next one. List of real estate owners, list of landlords, some blueprints. It can give us information on where your ancestors lived and how they lived. I mean, like how much did their house cost? Was it big or small, wooden or made of stone? Maybe there was some barn with horses outside, I don't know, but it all could be discovered. Next one. And we can also find out why they were rich or poor, what kind of business they ran, or they were maybe literate or not. Some tax inspector documents that can show their annual revenue, or find out if they have maybe like a soap factory, something like this. Next one. We showed you a list of documents we work with, but there are many other documents stored in archives that we can work with, that we can check and find various information depending on the purpose of the document. Now will show you examples of reports that we give our clients and what we put there. Next one. First of all goes ancestral pathway. So it's a flowchart similar to family tree, where ancestors are listed from generation to generation. It differs from a family tree because family tree contains information on people who live currently nowadays, and ancestral pathway contains only those persons that were identified by our archive team in archival documents. So it is pathway. Next one. Synopsis of our findings. In this section, we list all persons that were identified with their like vital information, and some information describing maybe their lifestyle, some features we have identified. Next one. Section of checked documents, where we give a list of all the documents that were checked. You can see it, you can learn its location physical, like fund number, list of files, case number, its name, when it was compiled, and how many documents how many sheets it contains. So you can see what amount of work was done, because every sheet should be checked manually by our team. Next one. By the way, we also give this list of checked documents. So next time you would contact either the Together Plan or any other genealogy or archive company, there will be no need to work with these documents and pay for rechecking these documents. We also make scans for all records we identify. First of all, it gives you an option to find out how was names, surnames were spelled originally in Russian. And also it proves that we give real information, real findings, that we do not fake it. So you can ask anyone who reads Russian. It's not the same Russian we speak today, but maybe they can help you and show you that we are right. Next one. So it's how the report looks like. We give a translated record into English. There is some issues with this because documents are mostly in Old Russian, and it is not the same language we speak today in Belarus and in Russian. It differs from modern English, maybe like Elizabethan English, like early New English. So we translated it into English, but always try to maintain its old-fashioned style. So we leave some old Russian words, but give you a special glossary at the end of the report, so you can refer to this section and find out what does it mean. Also, every record is followed by a scan, so you can see it's in original version. Next one. Another look at our report. Next one. Okay. Also, many people ask if we can guarantee that a search would be successful. Of course, we cannot say it for sure until we finish it till the end. And of course, not every case is successful. As Carl told you before, like 70+% are successful, but sometimes it's just because of lack for documents to be preserved. But sometimes documents did not preserved for some settlements at all, or there could be some big gaps between like in years when documents were compiled. For example, one document compiled was in 1902, and the second one was compiled in 1958. So we have like 56 years gap, and we do not how to connect people from one document to people within from the another. But sometimes these gaps could be even bigger. Documents are pretty old, some of them like more than 2 centuries old, so a lot of them were damaged, like page could be torn, burned, or just document could be, some pages could be lost, and documents could be on restoration, and it means that we have to hold a search and pause for 5-6 months until this document comes back to the archive and we can check it again. Another issue we deal with during searches is that Jews used to change their names when immigrating. Normally, they used to take the same first letter as in their Russian name. For example, Harry for Hirsch, Max for Mordecai, Morris for Moisha. But sometimes, and on purpose, they took like random names and fake their age on purpose, maybe to hide from criminal prosecution or some other reasons. And it's really a challenge that we deal with, but sometimes we have still great results even in such cases. Next one. Here you can see example of damaged documents. So as you can see on the right side, even if we find right document, right page, right record, we cannot use it. Next one. Yeah, and we came almost to the end of our talk, and it is just a little maybe reminder, not reminder, maybe warning for you if you're going to use private organizations to help you with archive searches here in Belarus, that since the fall of 2023, private archivists and private archive companies face some restrictions on a number of visits per month to get to the archive. it was limited to two visits per month, and to a limited number of documents like books you can obtain per visit. So we also faced this problem, and to find a solution, we find an official agreement with local company founded by ex-archivists that do searches for us currently. So we do not only our internal staff like archivists, researchers, historians, but also companies that assist us with these searches. So it's just it was our solution, and it is for you if you're going to use any service here in Belarus to find out if they have like, is everything okay with their access to archives. Next one. Okay, it seems we've done. Many thanks you, Carl, for introduction. Many thanks all of you for being here today with us. And once again, thank you for Center for Jewish History for giving us this chance. It's time for questions and our answers. And before we start, maybe we would kindly ask to, first of all, focus on general questions about services, etc. And then if we have time to go to specific questions about maybe like shtetls, names, etc. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Carl and Vasily, for your amazing presentation. I think it really helped a lot of us understand what exists out there and how you help people to connect to their roots in Belarus. So with that in mind, there's been a number of questions about costs. I understand that Deborah shared with us that the phase 1 search is typically priced at about £160. Can either of you clarify the range of costs for the phase 2 search?
Okay, it depends, as I told you before. First of all, number surnames, number of places, number of archives, but normally it starts about 800.
And that's for phase 1 or phase 2?
Phase 2, phase 2.
Phase 2, okay.
The general
phase-
theory, the theory behind 2 phases is we don't want to have to charge you for a whole search if there's
Exactly.
nothing there. But we still have to charge because we have to send our archivists in to find out, is there anything? So by dividing it into 2 phases, for somebody who's not lucky and there isn't anything there, it minimizes how much they're going to have to invest.
That makes sense. Okay, let's see. Somebody asks, Maxwell Preston asks, do we have to go through phase 1 and phase 2? This is not a question about do you need to continue on to phase 2, but rather Maxwell already has a lot of information from the Minsk archives, but is interested in some targeted search on some specific types of documents. Can he skip right to phase 2, or how does that work?
Okay, so as I told you before, phase 1 is needed, first of all, to find out real place of assignment. If the document that person already has show place of assignment and we'll know it, okay, likely we can start with phase 2. But second question is the availability of other documents we can deal with that could be like on question. So we always recommend to start with phase 1. And there is one more little warning, because once we have not even once, we had a client that gave us a report of findings, but without any scans, just referring to some documents and names, and ask us to look some extra documents. And when we start with our archive team to check new documents, there was some kind of like contradiction between what we see in documents and what was in the report. So we decided by ourselves to check documents that were mentioned in the report provided by client. And we understood that unfortunately it was like half faked.
Oh, wow.
Like the document, the report referred to a specific document, to a specific census list, and there was given a number of a family recorded, like number 27, for example, name Cohen. And when we checked the document, there was like number Cohen family, and under number 27, there was like random Kaplan family, maybe.
The other thing that Vasily has taught me, our reports will say, okay, we found information in these documents, but we also checked these documents. Most of the time when we have somebody who says, I've already done some work, they don't tell us what other documents they searched. So we don't know, because we could end up searching the same documents again, and that takes time. And that's why we almost always, I mean, we'll look at it, but we almost always think that the phase one is needed. Otherwise, we're going to duplicate a lot of efforts.
Right. It could be the case that some documents were already checked, but they were not mentioned in the report given you by previous archivists because there were no records. So you'll send us to check senseless documents. It also may be this case. Maybe it was also a question if you always need to phase two. No, of course you not need phase two if you have after completing phase one. So no obligations to proceed with both phases.
Okay, this is a question for Carl. Kaplan is a common name. How did you confirm that the person that you found was your great grandfather, I think, or I don't know, one grade or two grades. I can't remember.
Well, it's a really good question, because when I first did it, honestly, I didn't know the together plan. So like your first response is, wow, they found all this stuff. And then your next thought is, well, how do I know it's really true? But everything matched up. I mean, there's little things like if you see on the in Russian, it says, I'm trying to remember which one, Usher, son of Hirsch, matched up. And then my grandfather's name was Hotskill. And then his great grandfather, he was named, some of the things you look for is like, wait a second, I know that this guy wasn't dead yet, but you have him being named after his grandfather who was still alive. That doesn't make sense. Nothing, that wasn't an issue. So everything lined up. So at a certain point, and also you saw the criminal case, that was the address where he lived, 2 Hospitalny Lane. That was in the manifest from my grandfather.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So, as we like to say in genealogy, I don't have a driver's license with his photo on it, but at a certain point, but with Margolin, my great grandmother, the fact that when I tracked it back down, I found my great grandfather pop up again from the people in Minsk, that really tied everything together. So yes, I feel very, very comfortable about that, but it is a thought that goes through your head. So I did check.
Yeah, I have something to add. Yeah, of course, we cannot make DNA connections. We cannot check DNA, and archive documents, it's some kind of trust, maybe, because there should be a number of combination of factors to understand if these your ancestors or not.
Right. Because you're supplying, people, your clients are supplying you with basic information to start with. So
yeah. And of course, the more information we receive from you, the easier it's for us to understand if we are looking in a right way, if it is indeed the family your clients are interested in.
So is there some back and forth then in that first phase?
Yeah, as a case.
Sorry, didn't get it. Sorry, could you please?
Is there back and forth? And the answer is yeah, because if it's not clear to us, Vasily will be like, hey, do you know this or that? It would be easier. Where I see the back and forth a lot is where someone puts a shtetl in, and it's like, for that particular year, it could be a different shtetl, because we all know that names get handed down, they get changed, but a lot of people forget that shtetls, it can be all over the board. especially because they, different countries. So there is a back and forth, yes.
Right.
That's very important, I think. Okay, let's see. Oh, this, how long is the average waiting time on the wait list?
It depends on how big the waiting list is, and usually it increases every time after Zoom when we
Of course.
promote, when we tell about our services. To my mind, currently it would take about like 2-3 months.
Yeah, usually. Sometimes better, depends how
But
many.
it could be less, it could be more. It depends.
Got it. Can you access FamilySearch.org in Belarus?
I cannot say for sure yet.
Okay.
So I guess the question would be why, in the sense that a lot of people who ask us those things, they have their family tree, pieces of it that they want. What we try to do is tell them, and I can always help if they need it. You can download whatever information and then you send it. Ancestry, you can download a part of your tree, and in fact, most people don't like sending a family tree that has all their living people, but
Right.
maybe pedigree tree. But there are definitely ways to download whatever information. It's limited. Being somebody who loves genealogy, I work with all those. Not everybody else in the Together plan does. We deal with the archives. So it's much better if the client does that.
Well, I'm happy to hear that you help with that, Carl.
Well, to a point.
Yeah. Few people asked about synagogue records. Is that something that you find in the archives in Belarus?
Right.
Yeah.
As I told you, civil records, they were made by synagogues.
Okay.
Synagogue record books.
Got it.
Also, we have some documents from synagogues like rabbi elections. It could be also of interest. So it doesn't give any genealogy information, but we can see that a person was voting for some rabbis, etc.
Are there any lists of like members of a particular shul?
Could be list of parishioners.
Okay. Let's see. I think you kind of answered that question already. If our family name is not known to belong to any others, or I guess I'm not quite sure what they're asking actually, but they say, can you perhaps guess how that name might have been changed? I guess if they don't know what the name looked like when their family was in Belarus, is that something that you can help with?
It could be the case. There were it was a client. I do remember they knew a place and big set of names, but they gave us a surname. They thought it would be Horowitz. So we were looking for Horowitz, but at the end of the day, they were Gurevich. So
Yeah.
it differs. Horowitz and Gurevich are two different surnames.
Right.
But considering names, because there was a big set of names and their years of birth, so we were like completed a puzzle.
Got it. Because a lot of people, speaking for Americans,
common information. It depends on common information.
Yeah, people often just know what their names, what their ancestors' names were after they came to America.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and that's where we differentiate between archives and genealogy. So like if you can get hold of either USCIS immigration forms, the manifest, then the golden nugget is what was their name. In the same way that with like my great grandmother, I found the one nugget was a document in New York that I think it was a death certificate or a marriage certificate that listed her last name, her surname, or maiden name, sorry. And once I had the maiden name, then I was off to the races. Without the maiden name of Konevsky or Margolin, there's nothing I can ask them to do in Belarus.
Mhm. Jennifer Dorson writes, I've been learning a lot about the changing borders on the current Belarus-Poland border. What sort of interwar documents are available in Belarus and what are in Poland? Specifically, in the area south of Grodno.
It depends on the place. Mostly places that are currently in frames of Belarus borders. Documents on these places should be stored in Belarusian archives and mostly in Brest.
Let's see. Are the archivists mostly Jewish?
It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Because we live in Belarus and mostly people here are Belarusians.
Yes.
So it to my mind, I can say that not, but we have some Jews there. But to my mind, it doesn't matter if American, British, or Belarusian person checks your documents.
Yeah, it's true.
Okay.
Let's see. There's a lot of questions about about where records are
Places.
Based on border changes.
Mhm.
Do you have any connections with archivists in Lithuania, for example?
Right,
In that border area.
We have an archivist in Vilnius, and she works there. She assists us with cases, so it covers the entire Lithuanian territory. By the way, some documents in Lithuanian places are stored in Belarus, and some documents on current Belarusian places are stored in Lithuania. So it's like always an exchange.
Yeah. Somebody asked about, do you know why Belarusian archives are restricting access to their materials and how long these restrictions might remain in place?
It's just internal policy. It's officially was published officially on website. It's like official rule that works in archive, so that you sign it when you like go to reading hall to work with documents.
Okay.
I don't know if it is available in English, but it's free in Russian. But I'm not sure it's in English.
As Vasily explained it to me, it's more of a change in procedures rather than restrictions.
Right.
So it's kind of permanent because they changed it.
It could be changed any day, even tomorrow.
Yeah.
Okay, so now I'm going to ask a few questions, a few
Right.
more specific questions,
Okay.
because I think we're past all the general ones now. Let's see. Okay, my 4 times great grandfather immigrated with family from Ekaterinoslav, I think is how it's pronounced.
Sorry, I can get the name of a place from.
Oh, Ekaterinoslav.
Yekaterinoslav, it's Ukraine.
But recent research indicates the family was originally from Zelezhnodorozhny near Vitebsk.
Железнодорожный.
Will there be records from Zelezhno with connections to Ekaterinoslav?
I cannot say for sure. So I'm like archive manager, not archivist personally. I have been to archives a lot of times, but I do not check documents. So there are lots of documents on Vitebsk and Vitebsk region generally. So a person who asks this question, you are welcome to fill the web form and we will take a look. By submitting a web form, you give us, first of all, what we need is place and period of time. So we can check archive funds, our own databases, and find out, so if at least any documents are preserved, have been preserved and available to be checked. So please submit the web form and we will give you an answer.
Yeah.
Okay.
Would military records be found somewhere in the USSR for the USSR Japanese War of 1905?
Oh, I cannot say. We have never dealt with USSR versus Japan. I don't know, because some USSR documents, they even like cannot be disclosed. They are not available for free check. There's USSR military documents are stored in specific archives, and even documents for Belarus are stored in Moscow in military archives, and each person should have a specific like kind of access, and it's not easy to get it.
Actually, I'm going to go back for a second to a general question because I missed this earlier. How does it work for you if your client has an extensive tree that they built out, but the client is not 100% sure that they have all of the relationships correct on the
Okay,
tree?
for the first question would be, please give us the names, please underline the names you are confident in. So, and all the others we will mark as like questionable.
Okay.
So, and we pretty often have like a request, please could you like approve the names. So we go to census list and look if the names was this or that, true, right, true, false, etc.
Yeah, I think that's probably a common question among people in the audience today.
Yeah, there were many times that sometimes names could differ. Sometimes we see that every person was born like 10 years before or later than our client knows. Like every generation, like 10 years previously or later.
Oh, this is another question about archives now in Russia.
Not a question to me, guys, sorry.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see. Have you had any success with research in Pruzhana?
Grozany, it's in Grodno area. Documents on Prozhany did not preserved really good, but there are some of them. So depends on the period of time. We should check. So if you go on, but yes, we have some results from there.
Is there any way to find out if a particular person was arrested for underground activities or drafted for the military service in Minsk in particular?
Yes, there are many like draft lists, military draft lists from Minsk, especially of the second half of 19th century, early 20s.
And what about the arrests for I guess for political activities?
There could be in frames of police department documents.
Okay. Okay. I'm gonna now switch.
By the way, documents regarding anti-tsarist, like anti-imperial activity, like underground is like resistance. This like resistance was, if I can say, handled by specific police. I can say like old KGB. So, and there was like even specific archive funds dedicated to these stories.
Someone is asking about Talachin. Can you speak to whether?
Could you please? Talochin. It's Talochin. It's near Vitebsk. By the way, my mother grew up there. She was born in a place nearby, but grew up in Talochin. Yes. I do not remember if there was a Jewish community in Talochin, but there were many Jewish places around. So it makes sense to check.
Let's see.
It could be also a case that there was no Jewish community in a place itself, but it could be surrounded by a number of Jewish communities nearby, and place and family could be assigned to one of them.
I know this was answered in the chat, but it might be interesting for everyone to hear this. Can the documents that you provide be apostilled
Yep.
for
Yep.
official purposes?
You're right. You're right. First of all, we have like scanning services. If you are not interested in record in a search, you already know like physical location of a document, like what font, list of file, and case number, and a specific sheet. We can make scans for you and send it like digital scans via email. Also, we can make like hard ones on the paper with a seal stamp of the archive and signed by the archive director that it's like original copy of the document, and send it to you by post or emails.
Okay. Let's see. Someone asks that her great-grandmother was killed by the Cossacks between 1904 and 1906. Is there any way she can find information on this, or where her great-grandmother may have been buried?
1904-1906 by Cossacks, it means like near to Ukrainian border. Not the best like preservation of documents.
Oh, actually,
So
I forgot to mention that they were from Minsk.
From Minsk. From Minsk. Likely they were from Minsk gubernia, which was really big, like the biggest one, and it was spread to the east down, like to the border with Ukraine, not directly, but there was a very Jewish place named Pinsk that was, as far as I remember, attacked also by Cossacks. So maybe there could be some like civil records of synagogues that a person deceased was murdered, but it wouldn't indicate that she was murdered by Cossacks. Likely it would be just indicated murdered.
Okay. And should she assume that that she was buried in like a mass grave, or
I don't know. It could be indicated and could be not. But
okay.
but I have never seen that it was indicated like buried in common grave. Like
okay. It's getting close to time. I'm gonna see if there's one more question.
Generally, not every death records refer to a specific like location of a grave. It even not every time refers to a graveyard. Am I right? Graveyard, a place with cemetery. Yeah, it's not always even mentioned as cemetery where a person was buried.
Okay. But sometimes you see a cemetery.
Yeah, sure.
On the death record. Yeah. Okay. I guess lastly, there are a few questions about Grodno. So how do records from Grodno compare to ones in Minsk or Brest?
Could you repeat, please? Document about
like how many documents are you, like how successful are you in finding documents in Grodno versus Minsk or versus Brest?
Okay, if we're speaking about the city, or about like if we're checking documents on Grodno city, or we're speaking about checking documents in Grodno archives. So if we're speaking about checking documents in Grodno archive, that covers a big territory of Belarus, yes? The number of successful cases are almost the same as in Minsk, like percentage. But documents on this territory preserved not so good, like not so good, maybe like worse than for Minsk, because Grodno and Brest was border of Poland and was attacked by the Nazis army in 1941, and many archives were destroyed during the first week of the war. And a few Soviets did not manage to escape to move archives from there. So so documents on the like southwestern part of Belarus preserved worse than on eastern part.
Okay. So as we wrap up, can you please remind everyone of what email address they can contact you at, and where they can find your search search inquiry form? Yeah.
Okay. May I kindly ask Deborah to put a link into the chat? Oh, yeah, right.
Oh, there you go.
So
Perfect.
it is the email, but to contact us, you should better submit a web form, because it will give us opportunity to put you into the system, so you would not be forget, because we have a really big number of emails from clients. So it's the best way to stay in contact, to manage for us, is when you submit a web form. Deborah, Carl, can you please put I'll put a link, a direct link in 1 second.
I'm just gonna, if you go to the Together plan, which I think, are you seeing that?
Not right now.
Just letting you know, I put it in the chat.
No, thanks, Deborah. Did you put it to the website or to the services?
I put it onto the I put the archive at the Together plan, and I've also put the link to our inquiry form.
Yeah, thanks.
So if you go right now, it's not, if you go to the Together plan website, under our projects is heritage and then archive services. And then you'll see all about archive services. And if you go down a little bit, that's where you see the button to submit an inquiry. And that's the form.
Okay.
By the way, if you see a line, yep, here, if you click on it, you will, it's on every page. You can go to archive services.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. I feel like we are all a little bit more enlightened about you know, what it is like to do research in the Belarus archives, what kind of documents you've been able to find, what they look like, what kind of details they contain, and also, of course, you've walked us through your entire your services and the process of engaging your assistance as well. So I really appreciate you coming and giving that gift to all of us. And with that, I am going to sign off and say to everyone, have a good day, have a good night, and we look forward to seeing you at our next program. Okay.
Thank you so
Thank you
much.
so
Thank you, Moria.